Let's get started. You're welcome to Port of Vancouver. So again, my name is Doug Mills. This is Catherine. We're here both representing the port. I'm in trade development. Catherine's in the real estate department. So if you have any real estate questions, she is the guru. What we'll be doing today is seeing the inner harbor of the Port of Vancouver. So on your map, you're going to see the two bridges, and it's about that much of the map. So you're only going to be capturing a very small portion of the landmass that is the Port of Vancouver, which is over 600 kilometers of shoreline. However, I would say the majority of the types of cargoes that are shipped through the port are going to be represented on this tour. The only thing you will not be captured is our auto business, and I think that's it. There's some warehousing business too that we won't see. But all the other cargo types are within the area that we're going to see. So you're in Canada's largest port. We mentioned that earlier. The largest exporting port in North America. The unique feature that you're going to see between Vancouver, Singapore, and Hong Kong is the diversification that is this port. We handle a very wide range of commodities. Virtually everything that Canada exports, as well as the containerized imports that come in that basically provide all of our consumer goods. So we're going to have to move because of our little delay. We're going to be doing this in a little time crunch. So I'm going to be speaking very quickly because we're going to be seeing a lot of terminals as we go by. The first of which is on my left, on your right. This is one of 4 container terminals within the Port of Vancouver. This is Centerm. Centerm is a facility that is operating 45 is 2.25 TEUs. So that's the international standard for measuring container units around the world. This facility is rated at 900,000 TEUs. It is currently under development. We've just issued a permit to allow for the expansion of this to a 1.5 million TEU container facility. Unique in Vancouver to other ports in North America, you're going to see all the containers are on the ground. And the reason for that is so that you can stack them and maximize the land footprint. Many other terminals, for example, in LA Long Beach, they're on trailers and they're spread out over vast acres of land. They eat up a lot of property. Well, as you can appreciate, we're almost in downtown Vancouver here. So there isn't a lot of available land to be spreading a lot of trailers around. And much less the cost of this land is so expensive, it would be a very inefficient use of that facility. The other unique feature you'll see in the back here, you see those almost U-shaped contraptions that are in between the containers. Those are the cranes. They're called rubber tire gantries, or RTGs. They stack the containers from the trucks into the container stacks when they come off the rail, getting them ready for loading when the ship comes in, or when they come off the ship, they're preloaded into those stacks until the appropriate rail or train is going to be constructed for inland movement. The vessel you see here, China Shipping, that I would consider to be a moderate to small size container vessel that you see generally. That's probably around 5,000 to 7,000 TEUs. As you know, the new generation container ships are capable of handling over 20,000 TEUs. So we're talking about substantially larger. They're not a lot longer, but very wide. And thus you hear the differentiation between the size of container cranes, which are the shore gantries that you see here. The larger vessels need cranes that can reach out further across the deck of the ship, so the beam of the ship is much wider. Additionally, another feature that we have, because that our land is at such a premium, we need to be as efficient as possible, so all of our terminals have on-dock rail. So we're able to load directly from the vessel to the train, or from the train back out to the vessel. Typically, you will not load directly. It's not as efficient as if you pre-stack them getting ready for a ship to come in, and vice versa. The larger ships that you're probably going to see in particularly Singapore, they tend to be what we call a transshipment port. They're not handling a lot of domestic cargo for the local, we off here is being sent to rail or inland by truck. So there is no real feeder operations to speak of here. Everything for that is coming into Fort Canada will be coming off here. The ships, however, do not fully load and unload. Unlike Singapore, you will have a trans-Pacific ship virtually unload all of its containers and sent out to feeder ships, and feeder ships then supplying the large ships to go back. So that big ship making the trans-Pacific crossing will be unloading and loading, and often taking several days to do that. This ship will be in and out within about 8 to 16 hours. And the reason for that is it does not fully unload, it does not fully load. It will be only taking off those containers destined for Vancouver. It then goes down to the United States, either to Washington or to LA Long Beach. And it also has American cargo on board, which it will exchange for its import shipments going into the US, for the export shipments going out of the US. So this is kind of like an airline that's doing a circle route. And as it goes, it's letting those off at the different destinations. Actually, a bus. The bus is even better, because you're letting people on and off as you go at each of the ports. Very quickly, at the end, you see that building there. That used to be our number 2 container terminal, which you'll see later on when we come back in. And then originally that was a pulp shed. So another part of our business was found around the forest industry in this region. So a lot of exports of pulp, paper, lumber, OSB, plywood. However, that doesn't happen anymore, nor does the cruise ship business. So that building there is slated for demolition and will become part of the container terminal as part of the expansion. The next terminal, oh boy, I gotta do this fast. See the smokestack?
Yeah.
What do you think that is? That is a sugar refinery. So we bring in raw sugar from South America. It's offloaded at that pier that you see there. It is then brought into the triangular shed in the back, and it is then refined into white sugar, brown sugar, demerara sugar, syrups, and it is sold under the Rogers brand across Western Canada. The identical facility I was at last week in Montreal, and they do the same thing for the East Coast. So again, imports of raw sugar for distribution in Western Canada. The very right next door to it is our first grain terminal. That is AGT, or Alliance Grain Terminals. It is a consortium of Parrish and Heimbecker, Patterson Global Foods, and Northwest Terminals. So they have just, you see the blue, we call it a gallery. That is brand new. It's only been in operation for about 6 months now. The old gallery system that had been there since its inception back in the 40s when it was originally built was replaced, and that terminal now is able to move double its throughput because of the loading efficiencies that they've been able to gain. We'll talk more about that on the next grain terminal because I'm losing visual contact with that one. The next terminal we're running into is Vanterm. Vanterm is also operated by the same company that operates our largest container terminal, Deltaport, which is Global Container Terminals, which, believe it or not, is owned by the Ontario Teachers Fund. However, this is also about an 800 to 900,000 TEU facility. You will notice the same RTGs on board. You'll notice all of the containers are grounded. Same with every other container terminal within our facility. Also, by the way, we have some of the best productivity rates in North America in terms of on and off the vessel. So even though we're grounding containers, we're able to do it in such a way that we can maintain some of the highest standards for efficiency on the vessel. You're also going to see, I'm just wondering if I can see them on this. We also handle a lot of refrigerated goods through this port. So shipping things like blueberries, cherries, imported mandarin oranges, beef, pork exports. They'll all come in chilled containers, and they will be, again, handled like all the other containers, but there is what's called a container stack and a tower where you can plug the reefer into the hydro network, and will keep obviously the container chilled. It also allows the longshoreman to monitor the temperature gauges on a chart those that were with me on the elevator that got stuck, I'm very proud of you all. Everybody kept their cool. I was wondering how long I could. The next grain terminal you see, that is owned by or operated by Viterra. So I say operated instead of owned by, and the reason being is the port owns the land. And all the properties that you'll see are actually leased on a long-term lease to the terminal operator, unless it's on a private land. There are very few of those properties that we'll run into today. Most of the major facilities are going to be actually federally owned lands or port-operated lands. So again, you see that blue infrastructure, which is the gallery system. This terminal is actually going to reduce its footprint in terms of buildings by 1/3. The tower on the right-hand side is actually going to be demolished, and yet that terminal will be able to put out more than twice the throughput than it did before because of, again, that loading system. The tanks on the right of that actually are a separate terminal, and they bring piping out to the base of this outcropping of pier here, and that is a company called West Coast Reduction. They handle animal fats and waxes that have been rendered from the processing of chicken, beef, etc., and they sell off the tallow for soap production and other things. They're also a primary exporter, because they have tanks, for canola oil. So crushing facilities in the Saskatchewan and in Alberta bring their oil here, and it's exported overseas instead of the seed. So the seed, you're either sending it through the dry facility like the pack facility, or as crushed product. I'd like to point out to you now something that we built right on the left-hand side of the Viterra terminal. You see that a raised roadbed. That was a project that we were involved in order to see that we had capacity to meet all of this growing development. So what we recognized was there is a railroad that goes right down all of the waterway, right to almost past where we were when we got on board the vessel. Also, there's a roadway that connects the trucks that are going to all the container terminals. The problem that you have is there's a conflict. Every time a train wants to cross, it stops all the trucks, and vice versa. Trucks get in the way of trains needing to get into these terminals. There is your point of your pinch point that prevents your utilization of your asset. The port invested into this raised roadbed, which is almost a kilometer of area, in which we separated 12 at-grade crossings. That development gave us an estimated 70% additional capacity on the South Shore without putting one more hectare of footprint into the scenario. So really, that's where we get our growth. It's from utilizing the assets to their maximum capability and efficiency. So we're going to see another one on the North Shore, very similar to this. And when you hear about our investments that we talk about for federal infrastructure, federal transportation funding, much of them are like this. It's creating separation so that trains and road traffic do not get in each other's way, and that you can maximize the throughput capacity as well as the transit time for both of those modes of transportation. So you'll see several of those in our plans for the future. The yellow tux that you see here is one of the two major, what we call berthing tug outfits. This is Sam Smith Marine. They're a multinational outfit that do this in a number of major ports. In this case, Sam Smith does some of the contracting, as well as Washington Marine Group, which will go by their other facility here. But this is the tug basin. Those are some of the largest tugs in the world. I'm sure you'll see very similar operations in Singapore and Hong Kong. They're virtually running 24/7, 365 days. We're putting over 3,000 vessels through here every year. So as you can imagine, that keeps them pretty busy. The other thing I'll point out to you too, that we're very involved in, is the communication between the communities that operate or that are within our jurisdictions, and us having to maintain almost an industrial operation right at their doorstep. If you look right on the side of the hill, there's several houses and condos and apartments, and right underneath that is a railway track and several operations that create noise, that create a bit of dust, some light, and there's obviously a conflict between the enjoyment of homes and the ability for us to move cargo through the gateway. Well, the port does a number of things, one of which is under our lease agreements, we ensure that we're using best in practice standards for mitigating any of those issues that people would find disturbing or problematic. That's one issue that we get involved in. So whenever anybody wants to build something or wants to improve something, we will make sure that the standards they're using are of best in class. Second thing is, we have departments within our organization that are whose full responsibility is to engage these communities. So for example, my nephew, as a student at SFU, was just hired under their summer program. And he will get educated on the port processes and then go out to community events, to schools, to universities, to public events at our port, at various communities, and explain the benefits of having a working port in their backyard. Like, for example, 1 in 5 jobs are directly attributed to activities within our port. Like the spin-off of taxes that occur because of the businesses that can make money from working within the port. And knowing what happens if the port did not exist, how does that impact their daily lives? Like the hospitals, like the building schools, like all of those amenities that they would not have otherwise. So one of the focuses we have is making sure the word gets out. Lots of negative input through the newspapers, through the television that you hear from different interest groups. Well, there's also an economic story, and that economic story we feel is our responsibility to tell communities and to help the young people understand, and as far as elementary schools, right, to let them know what is it we do, why do we do it, and why should they care. That's something we take on very seriously. I like this facility. You see it's a bunch of containers. It looks like a bunch of containers to me too, but that's actually a unique mode of transshipment that occurs in this port that arguably either started here or in Montreal, I'm not sure which. So in effect what they do, you'll see this blue tower on the left, and next to it a big old structure itself. That is an elevator. What they did was actually started from the beer industry in Japan, Korea, China. They require, especially the Japanese, require very high quality standards for their beer making. The malt that they use, they like to be as clean, as pristine as possible. So they would be constantly measuring and monitoring the product that they would be buying in Canada and looking to see that they received as high a quality at their factories or as at their breweries as possible. They found a way to be able to bring in hopper cars full of malt, elevate them, and take a container, steam clean to food grade standards the inside of the container, line it with polyethylene, and then tip it up on its back and load it full of malt barley, seal it up, close the doors, put it onto a container ship, deliver it right to the brewery in absolutely pristine condition. They loved it so much, it started to take off, and then the Chinese started to do the same thing. And then the specialty crop people found out about it. We started moving peas, beans, lentils, seeds. Thus, you see the size of this. We now have 5 of these operations within the Vancouver region, and they're constantly transshipping from hopper cars into containers, utilizing that space for, I would call it high value, uniquely handled grain products. The other factor is the container companies really like this model. As you can appreciate, they want to keep a container as busy as possible. If they can keep it as close to the port as possible, they can then either decide to load it and get it directly onto a ship going east to get it to the customer and have the rotation of the container continuously making money, or they can load it empty and get it back so they can fill it full of consumer goods, which pay more actually. But the other unique factor and why that process is important, export ships don't have as many fully loaded containers as import ships. Why do you think that is? We export it. That's not quite the reason. No, it's because export containers weigh more than import containers. And you end up loading out the ship to its maximum capacity before you fill it up full of containers. As opposed to imports, they're lighter. You're shipping consumer goods as opposed to a container full of lumber or grain. So you can only put so many containers, and then you have to stop loading them because you've weighed out too much. However, you can put empties on them and get those empties back into circulation so you can fill them up again. So the container lines will like empty containers close to the port so that they can either load them with ready available grain or lumber, or they put it on the ship empty and still have it circling within the cycle of the container chain. As opposed to sending an empty container out to nowhere, Saskatchewan, waiting for a possible delivery of grain and hopefully booking it and hopefully having enough containers. And actually the amount of time that you have to add to the entire cycle of that container can be upwards of weeks. And that is nothing but cost to the container line. So another a part of the community engagement is you're looking at a park here. That park was actually donated back to the city by the port, and it was a park to allow the communities to get back to the water. You see a lot of industrial area back there. You can't get very close to the water, but this park in particular, although empty now, if you were to come here in July and August, is teeming with people. They've got a soccer pitch up there. They've got a swimming pool. And it is a constant picnic site for many folks, and it's right next to the industrial activity, and it actually engages the community into why the port's here, because they see this filling full of grain every day that they come down here. By the way, this is Cascadia.
Oh, I was just going to add New Brighton, right?
New Brighton
Yes.
Park, thank you.
So a very interesting, just a really quick thing about New Brighton. It is one of the, what we call the habitat enhancement sites that the port's really proud of. In fact, when I was hired 5 years ago, that's what I was hired to do, to be on the team. I was on real estate and acquiring the land. And the really nice thing with that particular site, there were no fish there 4 years ago. The year after it was constructed, fish came.
Yeah, the port has a really good history in terms of eco responsibilities. When I grew up here all my life, I was born here, and when I remember as a kid, you didn't swim in this area and you didn't fish in this area because all up there we call it Refinery Row, and a lot of industrial activity around here, and a lot of outflows too that came into the harbor that didn't bring in some not very nice water, let's call it, contamination. The port actually spearheaded the efforts to clean up the harbor by sourcing all of the tributaries coming into the area, finding all the sources of pollution, working with municipalities to create standards. Since then, we find schools of fish in here. We have killer whales now coming up, feeding on the fish that are coming into the area. You'll see lots of birds that are going after the fish. All great signs that the environment's coming back. By the way, this is the next terminal on the left. This is a Linterm. Linterm is one of our 2 break bulk terminals. Anybody know what break bulk is? So, big bulk, break bulk, a very easy way I put it is, break bulk is essentially anything that is packaged or in a state that you would pick it up with a hook or a crane and then load it into the hold of the ship. So this particular terminal will be handling things like lumber, pulp, paper, steel, steel casings for the drilling industry, pipe, project cargo such as boats, aircraft, various components for the projects in northern Alberta, for example, pressure vessels, etc. We see everything unusual comes off of this terminal. All those sheds in the back you see are pulp sheds. So they're bringing pulp bales from the pulp mills in the interior of British Columbia. They're being loaded onto these, what we call break bulk and or con bulker ships, and they're loaded into the holds that are specially environmentally keeps the humidity down. It's covered. They can load it in the rain, and it allows them to deliver product quite frankly, a lot of the forest products are now moving in containers because of those same reasons. You can keep them neat, clean, and out of the environment. So probably the one terminal that has been most in the newspaper these last few months and is not yet operational is the new grain terminal G3. So this used to be a break bulk terminal, part of Linter. It has been now split off, and it will be run by a separate ownership group. This, when finished, will be the most efficient and highest volume grain terminal in North America. The terminal is slated to move between 8 and 9 million tons of grain per year. That is, I would say, compared to the industry standard a few years back of about 2 million, 2.5 million. What makes this terminal unique? It will be able to take 3 120-car trains at the same time without decoupling them. There's a spiral network of track that has been built onto the terminal, and the trains will come on to the terminal and never stop moving. They will continuously move within the spiral and bring the train over an unloading pit where they'll open the hopper cars and unload each of them as they go over the pit, taking them into the storage area as they do. As one train leaves, another full 120 to 40 car train will follow it behind it, and because of that you'll see some unusual numbers for a single terminal to handle. This facility is G3 is owned in part by two major companies, one being Bunge of North America, and the other being Salak, which is a Saudi Arabian livestock and cattle company. They have particular interests in making sure they stopped growing wheat in Saudi Arabia a couple of years ago because of the amount of water it took to sustain crops in that region. So instead they're looking for global sourcing of food for people in that region. This is one of the investments that are intended to help shore up that requirement. It is around, you know what, I think that's a guarded secret, but we estimate it's north of $800,000. Sorry, $800 million. That would have been a bargain. Now, I'm going to mention this only because the sight lines you're going to lose real quick. In the back, you're going to see a few sheds with green color. That is actually a separate terminal called Neptune Terminals. The back shed that you see with the lighter green roof, that is for the importation of phosphorus from Morocco. It's brought in and it is put onto rail cars to Alberta, where it's made into fertilizers for the western provinces. The front sheds that you see with the darker color roofs, those are all potash sheds. So we're bringing in potash from Saskatchewan. It is being stored in the sheds until the vessels are here to load, and that potash is being shipped around the world for virtually everywhere that requires potash as a fertilizer. The ship over there, the Zanio, you can tell is loaded because it is down at what we call the Calypso line, the red markings on the boat. That is the most stable part of the vessel that you load to if you're going into the ocean. Obviously, the ship that you see here, the Calypso line, is way in the air. That means that that ship is quite empty and therefore is waiting to load, and that will be potash just because of the terminal location. When we get in between these two vessels, you're going to get a quick glimpse. You're going to see the most sought after coal in almost all the world. That is thermal coal. It comes from the Rocky Mountain seam in southern British Columbia and eastern Alberta. It happens to be some of the hardest and hottest burning coal that is required for high tensile strength steel making. Sought after in Japan, Korea, and China. They keep it separate from all other coal sources because they use it at very high technical strength. So this vessel, the blue vessel here, is under the coal loading systems. You couldn't quite see them, but there in the back is a large stacker reclaimer, we call it. It's a giant wheel, and it rolls into the stacks or into the mounds of coal. It'll bring the coal up onto the conveyor systems and bring it over into the loaders down into the belly of the ship. The stacker anchor portion, they stop the barrel rolling, and they can take coal from the rail cars and start building the mounds of coal while they're waiting for the vessels to arrive. I told you this was going to be a lot of talking very quickly. I apologize, but this is how fast it goes. This is probably the most condensed port you'll see almost anywhere. And we're talking about different products everywhere we go. If we'd gone past the bridge, I would have been talking about some more terminals that we just don't have time to see. But we have a sulfur potash terminal back there with ethylene glycol exports, sodium, the name escapes me now, caustic soda, bleaching products for the forest industry. Cargill is, their facility is right here, primarily grain exporter. Cargill is one of the largest food ingredients companies in North America. This particular terminal has a finger pier, which is a little unique. The pier comes out into the water and is able to take vessels on both sides and load them simultaneously. And yes. So, sorry, you could have, I mentioned the raised roadbed. This is the North Shore version of the same thing. There was a hill there, and that hill basically was all trees, and where you see the cars used to be down on a roadway right beside where the trains are right currently. Well, the port invested several $1 million in the roadway putting up on the side of the hill. What did that do? Well, it separated again the rail versus the roads, but it also created a really neat impact on the local communities. Because you didn't have crossings anymore, you didn't have to blow your whistle all the time, and you didn't hear the bells from the rail crossings. So what was seen to be port infrastructure impeding on their land actually ended up to be quite a benefit to the local communities, and created again additional capacity without building the footprint by creating more fluidity in terms of cargo movement. The next facility you see here is Richardson. All of those light gray on the right hand side did not exist 3 years ago. That is all brand new annex. All on the left side is the old system and old annex, and that facility probably has over 30 people working in it, ensuring the grain gets to the vessel. The right side, 2. It's all automated, all computerized. And if you'll also notice, that vessel is not loading yet. I like to point it out because they have a unique loading feature that allows the grain to go down the center of the loading tube, and there's a vacuum system that actually collects the dust so it doesn't emit any dust while it's loading. And allows them to live basically right next door to all the condos and houses in the back without creating any dust. So again, requirements under the port's building infrastructure that requires you to have best-in-class loading capabilities with features that impact the communities in a positive way. So I got a bit of a breather here, but see all those birds, the cormorants that you see? Those are fishing birds. And also those are ducks. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes. That feature was not here 30 years ago. We didn't see all of this wildlife occurring in our backyard, and I would say a lot of it is because we've allowed it to come back due to maintaining the cleanliness of the port, ensuring that the waters remain clean, that we pay attention. So I think one of the motivators behind the port is if we're out ahead doing things in a responsible manner, we can do it in a way that benefits both the community and industry, and we won't be regulated. We'll be out ahead of regulation. So in fact, what we're doing is leading the way by finding best practices in advance of having anybody point the finger for not doing it in the first place. So you'll see, some will say that we're a little pushy in the way that we want them to meet certain standards. Part of that is ensuring that we can continue to grow and that communities are on our side when we do. We got a bit of time, so any questions? facilities you might be interested, those are dry docks. And those dry docks are a key feature of the port for the marine industry, because what it allows them to do is undergo necessary repairs and or regular maintenance that you can't get at a lot of other ports on the west coast. There's very few locations you can do that. So consequently, there's two here and there's one in Esquimalt over by Victoria, and we'll find those constantly full of vessels from around the world. Different types of vessels, from rocket launchers we've seen in there to cruise ships to ferries, etc., yachts. So again, a reason why the Port of Vancouver tends to draw a lot of activity to it, because of the unique offerings that we have as a port. For example, because we have so many different commodities that use the port, there are a lot of competing services to industries that use the port. For example, a ship can now use 2 different tug operators instead of 1. It's got several different what we call ship's husbands that provide services to ships, keep the cost down. There's a ready source of labor here. Prince Rupert is kind of remote, not as many people up there, it's hard to get good quality labor. Also, there's 1 tug operation, you pay what they charge. Here, the cargo tends to want to come because there is activity already here, and the economies of scale exist for keeping costs at minimum, and allowing people to actually negotiate for their rates for whatever service might be. So I see what we're doing here is we're cutting across, because I think we're running into a bit of a time crunch. But I'll just point out from here a few things that we normally would move right alongside. You see the big blue metal structure in the middle of the air. That is part of Vancouver shipyards. That's one of the 2 largest cranes in terms of weight handling on the west coast of North America. It is actually a facility that is currently under contract by the Canadian government to build new fisheries vessels and it's military ships, but they're non-combat ships. So they have enough work to keep them going, I believe, for the next 25 years. Now, that also, however, what it does is gives us the ability to have shipbuilding in Canada on the west coast, which is a huge feature in terms of supporting the shipping industry from the commercial aspect as well. Further down, there's another facility you may have heard called Fiberco. Fiberco initially was a consortium of forest companies that utilized that facility to ship wood chips and wood pellets around the world, either to the pulp mill industry and or wood pellets for actually a lot to Europe for burning in fireplaces, and actually as an addition to burning coal as a renewable resource. However, the wood chip industry and the pellet industry primarily are bringing their commodities out of the north now. So there's a new facility in Prince Rupert. Thus, a lot of that cargo is moving through the north. So we're seeing a transformation of the Fiberco facility to handle special grain products, particularly canola pellets and canola meal. So we're now seeing that transition. They're now in the construction phase, and again, another agricultural product and a new upgrade for a grain terminal. And then further down, you're going to see a yellow pile of I call it the Yellow Mountain, and the facility in behind it. Bit of a funny story about the Yellow Mountain. That's sulfur, by the way. And sulfur, in this case, is a byproduct originally from the gas industry out of Alberta. In the original wells that were built, much of the gas supply was what we would call sour gas, and it virtually means there's sulfur in the gas. And it is not permitted to move any sour gas via pipeline or rail or transport it because of its toxic qualities. So they have to remove the sulfur, and then they sell it as a byproduct. So that sulfur is actually a combination of the byproduct of the gas industry, but also of the refining and upgrading from the oil sands. It's stripped from the product that's developed out of there. It's then sold as either a fertilizer or an ingredient for such things as making rubber tires scanners or computer screens or even elemental sulfur used in pharmaceuticals. The facility itself is called Vancouver Wharves. It's operated by Kinder Morgan, the same as the pipeline, and they handle a number of dry metal concentrates. They have a facility in Trail, British Columbia, which essentially takes those concentrates and then smelts them into various metal products like aluminum, or not aluminum, copper, lead, zinc, molybdenum. And they also bring product out of Alaska and bring it through this facility to the smelter as well. They also export ingots of the finished product. The terminal currently is up for sale. Oh, and the last thing too is they are also an agricultural terminal. They have several grain silos on that particular location, and they are currently handling all of the export product for Louis Dreyfus Corporation. So that was the fastest tour I have ever tried to accomplish. I apologize for I'm dry now, but we've covered off just a slice of what we do. Again, like I said, we could be going down south and seeing our largest container terminal, which is about an hour's drive from here. Our largest coal terminal is also about an hour's drive from here. Our T2 project is down in that region as well. That's fascinating because we'll be building a duplicate of Deltaport, 2.5 million TEU facility that currently doesn't exist. Right now it's water. We'll be filling it in with sand from the Fraser River, and when we get the permit, when we get the environmental approval, and then we will be leasing that to another container terminal operator for capacity that we see coming on at us very, very quickly. We're seeing about a 3.5 to 4% container growth year over year, and that is phenomenal. And if you consider that this port has never seen, as long as I've been here in the last 10 years, I've been here 19 years, I'd say the last 10 to 12 years, we haven't seen a year go by without an incremental increase. And that was while the U.S. terminals were taking significant cuts because of their issues with the housing crisis, etc. We never lost a beat. We just kept growing and growing and growing. And we see that moving into the future, which is forcing us to look for new innovative ways to find additional capacity. Last but not least, you cannot take a tour without talking about Canada Place, the place that we went by on the way in, the big white sails. So that whole area basically encapsulates a number of functions. One, it is the cruise ship terminal for the Canada-Alaska cruise market. We're expecting over 1 million passengers this summer coming through the facility where we're just in. It also houses the Vancouver Trade and Convention Center, which uses year-round conventions, along with the West division of the Trade and Convention Center. We got people surrounding our office almost weekly for events that are occurring, as well as the home of the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. We have our offices there. We house over 350 employees there that working for all that you saw here, as well as the what do we call it now? Well, you saw the hotel, and as well as the Trade Center, the World Trade Center, which houses a number of international shipping firms. The British Columbia government actually houses offices for business when they conduct in Vancouver as opposed to Victoria, and as well as a tourist destination. So we have visitors while we're all conducting business. We've got tourists that are walking around here, which makes it interesting in trying to concentrate on what you're doing, and folks are knocking on your window and waving. So thanks for your attention. I hope that was helpful. And again, we're sorry about the late start and